Hello and welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com. Today we're going to take a look at creating a CSS, fully CSS website layout. This one is going to be a 2-column layout, and you can see it auto expands depending on the amount of text or content, for that matter, you have in it. There's a nice little footer at the bottom. All of this will be fully customizable using CSS as far as background colors, the way you want your text to be styled, etc., etc., etc. But I will point out before we get going that there is, if you go over to tutvid.com, select the resources link here at the top of the page and choose project files, you can go in and download the files for this particular tutorial. And those files are a zip file, create complete CSS layout files.zip. So that can be downloaded from the site, and you can follow right along with me and do the exact same thing I do and get hopefully something that looks quite similar to this. So I'm going to come over to Dreamweaver now, and the first thing we want to do is create a brand new site. So up in the top bar, I'm going to do this very quickly. Site, new site, and we're going to give it a name. When the dialog pops up, there we go. This is going to be called Mystic Cloth, if I can remember how to spell cloth, and then choose a local root folder, and I'm going to choose desktop, and I'm just going to hit new folder. And right on my desktop, I'm just going to name a folder site, and I'm going to select that as my root folder. For the default images folder, we're inside of the site folder here. You can see, let's put us inside site. We're going to create a new folder called images. And while we're in here creating folders, I'm just going to create a new folder right beside it called CSS. I'm going to go back and I'm going to double click into the images folder and choose select. By the way, if you're on a Mac, all you have to do is select the folder and then choose, I believe it would be choose, not select. So double click images and I'm going to hit select once I'm inside of it. And that's it. We're going to hit OK. It's going to tell us that it is taking care of some back-end information management stuff, and our new site is now alive and ready to go. The first thing I want to do is go and open up that zip file, double click to open it up. It's going to open up WinZip. I'm just going to extract these guys right to my desktop. Extract, close WinZip, minimize the bridge. Holding the Windows key and pressing D minimizes all of your currently active windows and brings you right to your desktop. You can see I have all of these files. I'm going to drag them down, and I'm moving off screen now, I know. I'm just dragging over the Adobe Dreamweaver icon down there in the taskbar, the minimized icon, and you can see that it makes Dreamweaver appear. And I'm just going to move up and drop these into my images folder. I'm basically just moving my mouse cursor over the images folder and letting go. There you go, they're now in there. Alright, now I'm going to right click on the site folder here, right click and just hit new file. It's going to insert a new HTML file. I'm going to name this index.html. I'm going to double click to open index.html, and we are going to get started. Double click to open, there we go. Now whenever you create a new page and are getting ready to start designing it, I always like to, and it's good practice to, first give it a title. That way you don't launch a bunch of websites and realize you have a bunch of untitled documents showing up at the top of every one of your pages. So I'm just going to say Mystic Cloth Clothing Shop, or something to that effect. Mystic Cloth Clothing Shop. That's good enough for me. And I'm going to save it. Just Command or Control S saves your index.html page. So the first thing we want to do is change the background color of our page and insert a background image. So I'm going to open up the Properties panel, which is hidden right down there at the bottom. If you don't see it there, go Window, Properties. And I want to hit Page Properties. Now in Page Properties, I want to change the background color. I want to do Shift 3, which is the pound symbol, 000025. Looks kind of black, but it's really an extremely dark purple. And I want to also apply a background image. Now I'm going to hit Browse, and I'm going to choose Site Root up here, up at the top. That just lets me know that I'm definitely browsing this site. This is my site. I'm not crossing over to some other site. I just like to do that when I'm going to select an image or virtually anything through Dreamweaver's file selector. And I'll double click the images folder and BG, that is my background. I'm going to hit OK. And I want to repeat this along the x-axis, and that's it. So I'm going to hit OK, and you can see what we've got. We immediately have this nice faded background. Matter of fact, Command or Control S to save, and I'm just going to hit F12 to preview this in my browser of choice, which just happens to be Firefox. And here we go. We can already see what we've got. We've got this nice background. well on our way to creating this site. Let's go back to Dreamweaver. And before we do anything, we want to open up the CSS panel and create what's called a universal selector. Now, we're going to be working primarily with external style sheets. Now, applying this background was right here in internal style sheet just for this page, but for just about everything else, we're going to be using external style sheets. So I'm going to hit this new CSS rule button. It's like the page with the folded corner and the plus. And I'm going to choose advanced. I almost always use advanced because you can do tags and classes right through the advanced selector type. You just have to make sure you put your dot before the class and you get your tag names correct. So advanced allows you to do just about everything. And I'm just going to put an asterisk there. So universal selector. Every tag that gets inserted into this page will be forced or constrained by this style. And we're going to define this. I just hit that radio button in a new style sheet file. Hit OK, and it's going to ask me, okay, you want to define a style sheet file. Where do you want to put this CSS file? I'm going to double click on the CSS folder, and I'm going to call this layout.css. Hit save, and once I define layout.css as my CSS file, it allows me to start playing with CSS rule definitions. Basically, I'm going to come in here to the box category, and under margin, I'm just going to hit 0. Leave that same for all checked on, hit OK. And we will now have 0 margin on all of our elements, basically anything we put in this page. And you know what? If we want to go back in there, which I do want to do, you can simply double click that. You can see there's an asterisk under layout.css in our CSS panel. Double click, and we can go in there, double click, there we go, and select box category, and let's 0 off the padding while we're at it. Hit OK. So that's how you go back in and edit CSS rules that you've created. Now we're going to be working primarily through this layout.css file. So every time we create a new style or a new rule, you will see we'll be able to link right to that file. We won't have to create a new CSS file for every single rule that we create. So that becomes really helpful and allows us to really bunch together all of our CSS styles. Also notice that when we edit any CSS style in an external style sheet page, Dreamweaver automatically opens that style sheet for us and shows us the raw CSS code right there. Now, let's get into the fun stuff. Let's insert a div tag here. Now, you can insert a div tag right through the common toolbar, insert div tag. So that's what we're going to do, insert div tag. And we're going to insert it at the insertion point, which is basically wherever your mouse is. And we're going to give it an ID of wrapper. We're going to hit OK. Now you can see we have a div and we've got some text here that says content for ID wrapper goes here. We're going to delete that content. And we can go to code view and just note we've got a div with the ID of wrapper. And I just want to place the cursor in between the opening and closing div tags here. And I'm going to hit the refresh button up here on my CSS panel and make sure that I have the layout.css file selected and choose new CSS rule. Now note what happens when you're inside of a div. Your selector is automatically filled in. It says pound wrapper. We're targeting the wrapper div, and we're going to define it in that layout.css file. I'm going to hit cancel real quick because I want to go back to the design view because I want you to see what's happening as we're editing this style. So I'm going to do that again. Create new CSS rule, pound wrapper, hit OK. Now you can fill this in by hand if you want. I can just say pound wrapper, just like that. Hit OK. And CSS rule definition. Now we want this to be, I'm going to choose box, we want this to be, let's say 800 pixels wide. I believe that's the size of my header. I'm not going to apply a height because I want this to expand and or contract depending on the amount of content I have in there. So it's very important that we don't specify a height. So I'm not going to specify a height. Next, I'm going to go to the background category, and I'm going to set a background color. You got to put pound in there. If you don't put pound, it will not properly read the color, because in the CSS file, if you don't have that pound there, it doesn't even know what you're talking about. We're going to put the color, let's do a very light gray, F7, F7, F7. And let's go back to the box category. I should have done this before. And we're going to center this div. If I hit apply, you can see that we have this narrow gray strip here. Matter of fact, I'm going to give it some height just so you can see what's going on. 250 pixels of height. You can see we've got this 800 pixel wide gray box which we're going to shrink down in just a second. But in order to center this, in order to center any CSS div inside of its parent element, which in this case the parent element of this wrapper is the entire body, in order to center it inside of that, we want to set the right and left margins to auto. So hit the drop down menu auto, drop down menu auto. If I hit apply, check that out, it is centered. So there we go. I'm going to get rid of that height, hit apply, and there we go. We've got a very narrow gray strip up there. I also want to come to border and uncheck same for all. We want to do right and left. Just type solid, and the width. Let's do 1 pixel. It's 1 pixel. That's good. And we're just going to choose uncheck same for all. Just a medium gray here. Yeah, we'll stick with 99999, and hit apply, and we just apply a thin gray stroke along the 2 sides of that. Alright, I'm going to save this file. I'm going to choose layout.css, and I'm going to save that as well. Okay, so we have a wrapper div set up. Let's get a div dropped in there that we can place our logo in. So I'm going to hit insert div, and this time I'm not going to say add insertion point. I'm going to say after the start of a tag. Now, if you think about this, after the start of a tag would basically be after that tag starts, but not before it ends. So essentially, we're going to say put it inside of this tag. And that tag is going to be div ID wrapper. We want all of these divs to fall within this one big wrapper div that's going to ensure that everything stays centered and nothing, explodes out beyond 800 pixels wide. So it's going to really be the limiter on our site and keep everything nice and in line. The ID of this, let's just name it logo. We could name it logo wrapper if we wanted, but I'm just going to stick with logo just for the sake of simplicity. I'm going to hit OK. And you can see content for ID logo goes here. I'm going to delete that content, however. And I'm just going to come up here to layout.css, create that new rule. And you can see we have what's called specificity happening. The CSS is not only specifying that the logo div should be selected, but only the logo ID that's within the wrapper ID. So we're saying, yeah, check out the wrapper ID, and then inside of the wrapper ID, check out the logo ID, and that's what we want you to style. So I'm going to hit OK, and I need to just hit OK again without applying any styles. I need to come over here and check out my logo.gif. I'm going to check it out and check the size. I can do that right over here in Bridge. Here's where my files are exported to my desktop. There we go. It's the Mystic Cloth logo, and I can see that the size is 350 by 84. So I just want to make sure this div is 84 pixels tall. So I'm going to double click on wrapper, pound logo, and under box, I'm going to set height to 84. When I hit apply, you're going to see what happens. Very nice. I also want to set the background color of this to be just solid white. Okay, you can hardly tell the difference between the white and the extremely light gray. I'm going to hit, I'm going to hit OK for now, and I'm going to make sure that I'm inside of the div logo. You can see that that's selected down there on my coding tree, but if I really want to be sure, I can come into code view and just make sure that my mouse is between the opening and closing div tags, and I'm just going to say insert image. Again, hit site root, double click images, logo.gif, hit OK. I'm just going to apply an alternate text of Mystic Cloth logo. I'm going to hit OK and go back to design view, and you can see that we have in fact placed the logo. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select that logo, and I'm going to link it to my home page, because typically when you click on somebody's link, it takes you to their home page regardless of what page you're on. So I'm immediately going to do this, assuming that maybe this CSS page is going to be used as a template for the rest of the site. So I'm going to grab the link portion of the properties panel, click the point to file button, and just drag over and drop it on top of my index.html page. Now when that happens, you can see that this terrible blue border gets put around this image. So instead of spending the time to select this and come down here to the properties panel and set the border to 0, what I'm going to do is I'm going to nip it in the bud for the entire site by creating a CSS rule that targets linked images. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up to layout.css. I'm going to create a new CSS rule. I'm going to delete all this stuff. And I'm just going to say A, we're going to target the anchor tag, which is a link tag, space IMG. So any images within links, we want this to be applied to. So we're going to hit OK. I'm going to come down to the border portion of this, And the style, I'm just going to set to none. I'm going to hit OK. You're going to see immediately our logo has been fixed. And that's going to go for any image that we place in our site and link will be affected by this linked image tag, or rule, excuse me. The border will immediately be zapped and gone. So it's very, very important and going to be very helpful. So next we need to place a div that is going to hold our navigation bar. Now we're not actually going to create the navigation bar, just place a space for it essentially. So I'm going to hit insert div tag. We're going to say after tag, and we're going to choose